Acts chapter 2 verse 17 and 18.
Mabasa chapter 2 verse 17 na 18.
And it says there, in the last days, it will be, God declares, that I will pour out my spirit on all flesh. And your sons and your daughters shall prophesy. And your young men shall see visions. And your old men shall dream dreams. Even on my male servants and on female servants, in those days I will pour out my spirit. And they will prophesy. This is a sign of the last days. And even though Peter referred to this prophecy from Joel, on the day of Pentecost, this prophecy wasn't completely fulfilled on the day of Pentecost. If you actually have a look at what Peter said, he was pointing to the fact that what had happened on the day of Pentecost was the beginning of the fulfillment of this prophecy. Because it talks here about sons and daughters. It talks about young men and old men. It talks about dreaming dreams, seeing visions. So we can see it wasn't completely fulfilled on the day of Pentecost. And this points to this time called the last days. It talks about God's Spirit being poured out on all flesh. That's every nation, every tribe, every tongue, all flesh. White flesh, black flesh, yellow flesh, all flesh. Hallelujah.
Amen.
So we see in the last days God has said that there will be a pouring out of God's Spirit that will be worldwide. All flesh. On the day of Pentecost, it didn't come on all flesh. It came on maybe 120 people in the upper room. And they were all Jews. Isn't that right? But here it's talking about, in the fullness of this prophecy, that this is happening on all flesh. Every nation, covering the whole world. I believe that we're seeing that coming to pass. God pouring His Spirit out on all flesh, every nation. Hallelujah.
Amen.
The Gentiles are included. Isn't that wonderful to know? The second thing that we see, the third sign that we see, is in the same chapter, the book of Acts chapter 2, from 19 to 21. Peter continues quoting from the prophet Joel, and he says this, and I will show wonders in the heavens above, and signs on the earth below, blood and fire, and vapor of smoke, and the sun will be turned to darkness, and the moon to blood, before the day of the Lord comes, that great and magnificent day. And it will come to pass that everyone who calls upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. Now these verses that we're reading follow on from the verses we were reading in, just before, verse 17 and 18. So Peter is still quoting from Joel a prophecy about the last days. And so we see God here saying He's going to show wonders in the heavens above and signs on the earth below. This is what I see. I don't know whether it's exactly what you see, but let me tell you what I see in these verses. You see, not only is God going to pour His Spirit out in the last days, but there are going to be signs in the heavens, and there are going to be signs on the earth. What do you think the signs or the wonders in the heavens that he's talking about are? Well, I believe that he tells us right here in these verses. He says the sun will be turned to darkness and the moon to blood. What might this be referring to? The sun being turned to darkness and the moon to blood? Well, one thing we do know is that at an eclipse of the sun, how many of you remember there was an eclipse of the sun, I think around about 2003, somewhere in that region, 2002? How many of you saw that? On that, I traveled up to Hippo Pools, a place just near Madziwa Mine. Because at that place, you could see the eclipse was in its fullness. And when that happened, what happened on the earth is things went dark, isn't it? How many of you know that just the other day, I think last year, there was what they call a blood moon? How many of you heard of that? Where the moon turned to the color of blood. Now, this is mentioned here. The sun being turned into darkness and the moon to blood. Alright? I don't know whether it's talking about it going to happen at the same time. But we have already seen the sun turn to darkness and the moon to blood. It is possible that this could be referring to something else. So we're waiting to see the fulfillment of this. There's many things that could cause this to happen. But we have already seen what could possibly be it taking place. What about the signs on the earth below? I believe that right here in these verses, he tells us these signs. Blood, fire, and vapor of smoke. He mentions here. What might this be referring to? I believe it sounds very much like big war. Major war. Blood is spilt in war. Fire obviously comes from war. And billows of smoke. Might it be referring to war and the kind of warfare that we see on the earth today? You see, in the days that Joel spoke these words, when nations went to war, it was with spears and swords and arrows. There was no fire. There were no huge clouds of smoke. But today we know
asi nhasi tinoziva
because of the weapons of mass destruction that are now in the hands of men,
nekuda kwezvombo zvokuparadza zvakagadzirwa nevanhu
that war will produce these signs.
kuti hondo dzinoburitsa zviratidzo izvi.
When those missiles fall, you will see pillars of smoke rising into the heavens.
mukaona mamisaro aya akandwa munoona hutsi hwakakura huchikwira mudenga.
Could it be that as Joel looked prophetically,
zvingava here kuti joero akatarisa nechiprofita
he was seeing the wars as we see them today?
aiona hondo semaonero atinoziita nhasi,
Signs on the earth,
zviratidzo,
Blood.
ropa,
fire,
moto
pillars of smoke.
neutsi, muteyo utsi.
As I said, you may have a slightly different idea. That's the way I see it.
nogona kuona mamwe maonero asi ndo maonero andinoita.
So we see what I believe we see here, that there will be signs in the heavens
Sasa ndotenda pano ndinoona kuti tichaone zviratidzo
that
kudenga
are going to affect the sun and the moon
zvichabata zuva nemwedzi
and our view of them.
nemaonero edu atinozviita.
And we see what I believe is war and the effects of war on the earth.
uye tinoona zvakare zvatotenda kuti hondo nezvinobukira pahondo panyika,
Signs of the last days.
zviratidzo zvemazuva ekupedzisira.
Let's continue. Let's have a look at another sign. And this is where I really want to start focusing on what this seminar is about.
regai tipfuurire mberi titarise chimwe chiratidzo uye ndo patinoda kunyanyotarisa pasemina ino,
Because the fourth sign
nekuti chiratidzo chechina
is that the last days will be difficult times in which to serve God.
ndechekuti mazuva ekupedzisira achange pane nguva dzakaoma pakushumira Mwari.
Do you believe we're living in the last days?
Tinotenda here torarama mazuva ekupedzisira.
2 Timothy chapter 3,
Timoteyo chipiri chapter 3
verse 1 to 5.
verse 1 kusvika 5.
Here we see the Apostle Paul prophesying.
Pano tinoona muprofita Pauro achiprofita.
The apostles actually gave many prophecies.
Profita akatotaura zviprofita zvizhinji.
And look at what he says.
Tarise zvaanotaura.
He says, understand this,
Anoti muzive chinhu ichi
that in the last days
kuti namazuva ekupedzisira
there will come times of difficulty.
kuchava nenguva dzekutambudzika.
Another translation puts it this way, there will be perilous times.
Mamwe mabhaibheri anotaura kuti pane nguva dzakaoma,
Times that are difficult for people to deal with.
nguva dzakaomera vanhu kuti vapinde madziri.
Let's see why.
Ndikatoona kuti sei,
Because Paul carries on and he tells us why these difficult times are going to come.
nekuti Pauro anotaura kuti sei nguva idzi tichazouya.
He tells us what will be the cause of these difficult times.
Anotaura kuti chii chichakonzera nguva dzakaoma idzi kuti dziuye.
He says, for people will be lovers of self,
Akati nekuti vanhu vachava vanozvida,
lovers of money,
vanoda mari,
proud,
vanozvirumbidza,
arrogant,
vanozvikudza,
abusive,
vanotuka,
disobedient to their parents,
vasingateereri vabereki,
ungrateful,
vasingatendi,
unholy,
vasina utsvene,
heartless,
vasina rudo,
unappeasable,
vasingaregereri,
slanderous,
vanochera vamwe,
without self-control,
vasingazvidzori,
brutal,
vane utsinye,
not lovers of good,
vasingade zvinhu zvakanaka,
treacherous,
vanomukira,
reckless,
vanoita manyawi,
swollen with conceit,
vanonyengera,
lovers of pleasure
vanoda kuzvifadza
rather than lovers of God,
kupfuura kufadza Mwari,
having the appearance of godliness
vane mufananidzo bedzi wokunamata Mwari,
but denying its power.
asi vachiramba simba racho.
You see, Paul starts off here with this prophecy,
Unoona Pauro paanotaura nechitanga chiprofita ichi,
prophesying difficult times that will come in the last days.
achiprofita nguva dzakaoma dzichauya nemazuva ekupedzisira.
And then he gives us insight into the cause.
Otanga kutionesa chikonzero.
And we could break it down and summarize it in three things
Izvi tinogona kuzvipatsanura tozviisa muzvinhu zvitatu
that will characterize humanity
zvinotiratidza unhu hwemunhu
and the pursuits of humanity
uye nezvinoteverwa nemunhu
in the last days.
pamazuva
The
ekupedzisira.
first one is this,
Chekutanga ndechichi,
the love of self.
kuzvida,
The love of self.
kuzvida.
We could put this in another word, selfishness.
Togona kuzitaura kuti chidini.
That means people will care first and foremost about themselves.
Zvireva kuti chekutanga vanhu vane hanya naivo pachezvavo.
And caring for others will be a secondary thing. It means that as society develops into this, people will just be seeking to look after number one. And they'll not care about anybody else. It will just be, what do I need and what is going to benefit me? And that's what people will pursue. They will love themselves. You know, as I look around today, I think we are here. I believe we are living in the fulfillment of what Paul spoke. I look at Facebook, and you know what I see happening on Facebook? Everybody is just talking about themselves. Everyone wants to take a photograph of themselves and post it for everybody to see online. I believe it shows something. People love themselves. And the love of self is growing. Where no one is really interested in other people. It's just about me. You want me to give in the church? What am I going to get out of it? I look at some of the television ministries when they come to the end of their program. And I've begun to notice something. They're asking people to support their work. And in order to get people to support them, they have to do something. They have to offer a product. If you send $25, we will send you this product. And I ask the question, why can't people just support it without having to receive something? Why do people have to be enticed in order to support the work of the Lord? The love of self, I believe, is a characteristic that is growing and rising in this generation. And it's one of the characteristics that Paul says is going to make the last days a difficult time to live in. The second thing that he mentions here is the love of money. I don't believe we've ever lived in a time where people love money as much as they do today. Money is a god in this world. And I tell you, it's even affecting the church. The love of money is affecting the church. And the love of money, Paul says, is going to be one of the things that are going to make the last days difficult times. And I see it rising. I remember back in about 2003, I went to Hatcliffe, which is one of the high-density areas in Harare. I don't know whether you're familiar with it. And I remember asking people that were living there, do you have a problem with theft here? We were actually preparing to do a crusade, which is why I was asking these kind of questions. And the answer came back, no, there's no problem with theft here. That was 11 years ago, 12 years ago. Mr. Makusa, one of our team members, lives in Hatcliffe. And he's telling me they're having big problems with it now. In fact, just last week someone was arrested trying to steal in the next door house. What's happened in the last 12 years? Maybe times have got more difficult. But I also think this. Greed has risen. The love of money And it's not just here, it's all around the world. People will kill for some money. People will sell their bodies for some money. People will sell drugs that destroy people for money. Money has become and is very much a god in this world. And we know that Paul himself said the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. You cannot have a society where money is loved without there being evil. Because that love of money is going to give birth to all kinds of evil. He said the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. You know, many times we're wondering why there are certain sins and evils taking place in our communities. One of the roots, if not one of the main roots, is the love of money. And you know that those evils will never disappear from the society as long as the love of money remains. And sometimes we're trying to get rid of all these things, but we're forgetting that at the root of it is the love of money. Even many things that are taking place in the church, evils that are taking place in the church, at the root of it is the love of money. We're going to talk more about that later on in the seminar. The third thing Paul mentions is the love of pleasure. I was talking to Pastor Makaka yesterday, and he said to me that you had a crusade here in October, I think it was last year. And at the same time, Luna Park arrived. And he said to me, no one came to the crusade, they all went to Luna Park. You see, Paul says here, people will be lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God. People will be more interested in entertainment than they are in God. And you know, I see even in the church, I talk with pastors, church leaders, and I'm hearing them more and more saying we've got to increase the attraction in the church. If there's no entertainment in the church, people will not come. You know, people won't come to a seminar like this because there's no pleasure here. If we give them some pleasure, bring out the Coca-Cola, bring out the food, we'll have 3 times the amount of people. But if there's no pleasure, even if there is the knowledge of God, we're not interested. And you know, we live in a society, we're seeing this today. We live in an entertainment-driven society. Some of the richest professionals in the world are who? People that are providing pleasure for others. Whether they are sportsmen and women. I look at what some of those footballers are earning. I heard that they're earning something in the region of £50,000 a week. And I think there are people earning even more than that. Some of the Messis and Ronaldos are earning more than that. What are they doing to earn that? Providing entertainment. What about the big music stars in the world?
Ko vanhu vaimbi vakuru vepanyika.
They fly in their private jets.
Vanofamba nemajeti
What are they giving people?
vari kupa vanhu
Pleasure. That's it.
kufara.
That's what they're giving people.
Ndizvo vari kupa vanhu
Pleasure.
mafaro.
The television stations,
Ko vematv
DSTV,
maDStv
I think they're doing very well.
akungakuti hazvitovafambira chaizvo.
Why? Because they're providing entertainment.
Sei nekuti vari kupa vanhu
All the reality shows that are coming out.
zvose mashow ari kuitwa.
We're in an entertainment-driven generation.
Tiri murudzi runosundwa nezvinofadza.
You were mentioning the number of nightclubs here
Makatitaura tine mamwe manightclub ari
in Rusape.
muRusape.
Why are they there?
Sei ari kumanightclub.
What are people getting from them?
Vanhu vari kuwanei kubva kwaari?
Pleasure,
Kufara,
entertainment.
kufadzwa.
Why are there so many?
Sei akawanda
Because that's
manightclub.
what people are seeking.
Nekuti ndozvikutsvagwa nevanhu.
That's what people want.
Ndozvikudiwa nevanhu.
So there's a footballer
Saka kune mutambi webhora
earning that amount of money
ari kuwana mari yakadaro.
from kicking a piece of leather around a field.
Pakukava chiganda
With some skill, I must add.
nemaskiri.
But I look at men of God.
Asi tikatasa vanhu vaMwari
They barely have money to put food on their tables.
havani mari yekutoisa chikafu patebhura.
What's at the root of it all?
Ko chii chiri pamudzi
These
wacho?
things that we're talking about.
Zvinhu zvati kutaura
The love
nezvazvo.
of self,
Kuzvida,
the love of money,
rudo rwemari,
the love of pleasure.
rudo rwekuzvifara.
All these characteristics that Paul talked about
Zvose zvitatu zvakataurwa naPauro nezvo.
are alive and doing very well in our time.
Zvipenyu uye zvikutorarama chaizvo panguva yedu.
Do you know, Peter also spoke about these last days.
Nozvera Petro akataura zvakare pamusoro pemazuva ano
In 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 3,
naPetro wechipiri chapter 3 verse 3
he says these words.
anotaura mashoko aya.
He says, but above all,
Anoti chekutanga pamusoro pazvose,
notice that, above all,
pamusoro pazvose,
remember that in the last days,
rangarai kuti mazuva ekupedzisira
men will come
vanhu vachauya
who will make a mock at everything.
vachava vaseki pazvinhu zvose,
Men governed only by their own passions.
vachitevera kuchiva kwenyama yavo.
Isn't it amazing that the Apostle Peter would write and he would say, above all, remember this.
Nyaya here kuti Petro anotaura achiti pamusoro pazvose rangarirai izvi.
Those words, above all, are very powerful words.
Mashoko ari pamusoro pazvose mashoko ane simba.
He's saying, above all, remember this.
Anoti pamusoro pazvose rangarirai izvi,
That in the last days,
kuti namazuva ekupedzisira
men are going to be scoffers.
vanhu vachava vaseki.
They're going to scoff at everything.
Vanenge vachiseka zvinhu zvose.
And they're going to be ruled by their own passions.
Ivo vachange vachitungamirirwa nekuchiva kwenyama yavo.
Why is he saying this?
Sei ari kutaura izvi?
He's talking about what Paul is talking about.
Ari kutaura nezvazvino naPauro.
Difficult times to deal with.
Nguva dzakaoma kurarama madziri.
Difficult times particularly to be preaching the gospel.
Nguva dzakaoma kunyanya kuparidza vhangeri.
Difficult times to be leading a congregation.
Nguva dzakaoma kutungamirira kereke.
Because as you lead the congregation, you're going to be dealing with these things.
Nekuti pakutungamira kwenyu kereke muchasangana nezvizvi.
Scoffers are going to come in.
Vaseki vachauyawo kereke.
People that are governed by their own passions are going to come in.
Vanhu vanotevera kuchiva kwavo kwenyama vachauyawo mukereke.
There are going to be those that love themselves, love pleasure, love money in the midst of us.
Kuchange kuinewo zvakare vanozvidawo, vanoda mafaro, vanoda mari pakati pedu.
Look at what Paul said in 2 Timothy chapter 4.
Tarirai zvinotaura naPauro, 2 Timothy chapter 4.
2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 3 and 4.
Timothy chapter 4, verse 3 and 4.
He says this, the time will come
Anotaura izvi anoti nguva ichasvika
when people will not listen to sound doctrine,
vanhu pavacharamba kuteerera dzidziso yakarurama,
but will follow their own desires
asi vachada zvinovafadza ivo.
and will collect for themselves more and more teachers
Ivo vachazunganidzira vadzidzisi vazhinji
who will tell them what they are itching to hear.
uye kuti vadzidziswe zvinodiwa nenzeve
And they
dzavo.
will turn away from listening to the truth
Vachafuratidza nzeve dzavo kuchokwadi
and give their attention to myths.
uye vachatsaukira kungano.
Paul was talking about a time that would come.
Pauro aitaura pamusoro penguva yakanga ichiuya.
And I believe that we're living in that time.
Ndinotenda kuti tiri kurarama munguva iyoyo.
You know, today as preachers,
Noziva kuti nhasi sevaparidzi
There's always a temptation
pane muyedzo nguva
to
dzose
try and come up with some new revelation.
wekuti tiuye nechiratidzo chitsva nguva dzose.
Maybe some of you came to this seminar thinking, I wonder what new revelation he's got.
Vamwe wenyu vauya kuno vachita hamiri kuti vane chiratidzo chitsva chipi.
I've come to realize that's a temptation.
Ndatosvika pakuona kuti muyedzo iwe.
It's almost like as pastors, as preachers, as teachers, we've got to come up with something new to keep people interested.
Zvakatoita songe sisi vaparidzi nevadzidzisi nevashumiri tofanira kuva nechinhu chitsva nguva dzose kuti vanhu vafadzwe.
And I listen to people
Ndinoteerera vanhu
that are doing preaching and teaching,
vanenge vachiparidza nekudzidzisa
even here in this nation today.
kunyange muno munyika nhasi.
And I see some of the most amazing revelations that they're coming up with.
Tinoona zvimwe zviratidzo zvavanobuda nazvo.
I see people who are no longer concerned about sound doctrine.
Tinoona vanhu vasisina hanya nedzidziso yechokwadi.
But all they're concerned about is telling people what people want to hear.
Asi changoni hanya nacho kutaurira vanhu zvinoda kunzwikwa nevanhu.
And this presents a challenge for every single one of us.
Izvi zvinenge zvatimisikidzira chimwe chipi pamberi pedu.
Are we going to fall into the temptation
Tichapinda here mumuyedzo
to tell people what they want to hear
wekuti titaurire vanhu zvavanoda kunzwa
so that we can gather them?
kuti tivaunganidze?
Or are we going to stick to sound doctrine?
Kana ticharamba takabatirira padzidziso yechokwadi.
Paul said the time will come when people will no longer put up with sound doctrine.
Pauro anotaura achiti nguva ichasvika kuti vanhu havachade kunzwa dzidziso yechokwadi.
In other words, if you come to them with sound doctrine, they're going to say, we don't want to listen to him.
Vamwe mazwi kwaane dzidziso yechokwadi kwavarana kuti hatiri kuteerera izvi.
And they will bring many teachers that they want to hear.
Ivo vachazvunganidzira vadzidzisi vazhinji vavanoda kunzwa ivo.
Teachers that say the things they like.
Vanhu vanodzidzisa zvinhu zvavanofarira.
I've heard people saying this even in church.
Ndakanzwa vamwe vanhu vachitaura izvi kunyanya mukereke.
I've heard people sitting in the church say this.
Ndakaona vamwe vanhu vachigara mukereke vachitaura izvi.
I don't like that preacher.
Handifariri muparidzi uyu.
I like this preacher.
Ndinofarira muparidzi uyu.
Why?
Sei?
He's humorous.
Nekuti anotaura zvinosekesa.
He entertains me.
Anondifadza.
Why do you like him?
Sei uchifarira uyu?
He's got freshest revelations.
Nekuti anouya nezvizaruko zviswa.
He's able to bring some revelations out of nothing.
Anoburitsa zvizaruko pasina chipi.
And yet, the one who's presenting sound doctrine,
Asi uyu ari kudzidzisa chokwadi,
teaching the word of God line upon line,
achidzisa shoko raMwari tsara netsara,
people say, he's boring.
vanhu vanoti uyu anobhora.
He's boring.
Anobhora.
I don't want to listen to him.
Handidi kuteerera.
And that brings temptation to us as preachers and teachers of the word of God.
Zvinobva zvaunza muyedzo kwatiri isusu vaparidzi nevadzidzisi veshoko raMwari.
Do you think we're living in these days?
Ndofunga kuti ndomarazuva atitorarama here.
We definitely are.
Ndovatitorarama chaizvo.
You see, these are signs of the last days.
Nona izvi ndo zviratidzo zvemazuva ekupedzisira.
And they can be a bit confusing.
Zvinogona kutikanganisa kufunga.
Because on one side we hear God saying,
Nekuti kuno rimwe rutivi tinonzwa Mwari vachiti,
the church is going to be established.
kereke ichasimbiswa.
And all nations are going to stream into it.
Nyika dzose dzichauya kwairi.
And I'm going to pour out my spirit on all flesh.
Ndichadurura mweya wangu pamusoro penyama yose.
And we see him talking about the signs
Tinoona achitaura pamusoro pezviratidzo
in the heavens
denga
and on the earth.
nepanyika.
And then we see
Tochiona
on the other side,
kune rumwe rutivi
Paul saying it's going to be difficult times.
Pauro achiti kuchava nguva dzakaoma.
Peter saying it's going to be scoffers.
Petro achiti kuchava nevaseki.
It's going to be tough times to be a minister.
Dzichava nguva dzakaoma kushumira.
People will no longer put up with the truth.
Vanhu vacharamba kuteerera
They'll
chokwadi.
no longer be hungry for sound doctrine.
Havachava zvakare nenzara yekunzwa chokwadi.
They're just going to be about being pleased, wanting to be pleased.
Vanenge vangotsvaga kufadzwa chete.
No one is going to want a preacher who stands up and speaks the truth.
Hapasisina munhu anoda muparidzi anosimuka achitaura chokwadi.
They're going to want a preacher that stands up and says what they want to hear.
Vachada muparidzi anosimuka otaura zvavanoda
Feeds
kunzwa.
their desires.
Anofadza zvishiwo zvavo.
So we see two sides.
Saka tinoona mativi maviri.
We see the church growing.
Tinoona kereke ichikura.
We see the Spirit of God being poured out.
Tinoona mweya waMwari uchidururwa.
And then at the same time,
Asi panguva imwe chete
we see difficulty.
tinoona zvakaoma.
We see all these things that Paul and Peter were talking about.
Tinoona zvose izvi zvaitaura nezvazvo naPauro naPetro.
And one might almost think that They're contradicting each other. How can we have the church growing and the Spirit of God being poured out while people are lovers of self and money and pleasure? While there are scoffers. While people don't want to listen to sound doctrine anymore. See, the way I liken it is this. If you have a railway track, there's two tracks, isn't there? Going at the same time. On one side, we see God pouring out His Spirit. We see God's holy people becoming more holy. On the other side, we see evil. And we see men becoming more wicked. Do you know that that's going to happen at the same time? We're going to see people being saved and following God with all their hearts. And we're going to see people mocking and scoffing. It's going to happen at the same time. We're going to see God pouring out His Spirit. But we're also going to see man just increasing in wickedness. Happening at the same time. You know, sometimes we look at revival and we think that when there's revival, everything will be good. But you know that it doesn't work that way. There was great revival in Jerusalem. 3,000 people baptized on one day. The number grew in a matter of days to 5,000. That's considerable church growth, isn't it? I don't know whether your church has grown by 3,000 in one day. But that's what happened in Jerusalem that day. And then 5,000 a few weeks later. But you know that while that was happening, there was great persecution. The apostles were being put in prison. They were being beaten and flogged. There was great opposition. There were evil men who were releasing all their evil. Stephen got martyred in the midst of a revival. The church was scattered. Can you imagine, as fast as that church was built, it disappeared? You see, so what we're talking about with the last days is these are the things that are going to be happening. There's two sides to it. If you look at a coin, how many sides are there? Two sides. There's two sides to what's going to take place in the last days. We're going to see what God is doing, and we're going to see what men are doing. What God is doing will be good, and what men do will be evil. So now let's look at another sign. And this is the sign that this whole seminar is about. What we've been talking about up to now is really just the introduction. Just laying the foundation for this whole seminar. But there's another sign about the last days and the end times that is very important for us to focus in on at this time in history. Deception and the end times. I think we're on page 7 for those of you that are following. And if you look at the top there, it says, I've written this, according to Scripture, the rising of multitudes of deceivers. Into positions of great prominence and influence will be the chief sign of the time. Immediately prior to the return of the Lord Jesus and the end of the age. All right, you've seen it there in your manuals.
Zvona zvakanyorwa
The
mumanual.
rising of deceivers.
Kumuka kwavanyengeri.
Not a few,
Kwete vashoma.
but it says many, and we're going to look at this.
Zvinonzi vazhinji tichazvitarisei.
Into positions of great prominence and influence
Kuenda muchinzvimbo chechikuriri nesimba
will be the chief sign of the time before Jesus returns.
chichava chiratidzo chikuru chenguva Jesu asati adzoka.
1 John chapter 2 verse 18.
Johani kutanga chapter 2 verse 18.
It says, little children,
Inoti vana vaduku.
it is the last hour.
Inguva yekupedzisira.
And as you have heard that the Antichrist is coming,
Sezvamakanzwa kuti Antikristu ari kuuya.
even now many Antichrists have come,
Kunyange iko zvino vana Antikristu vazhinji vakatouya.
by which we know that it is the last hour.
Vatinoziva navo kuti yava nguva yekuguma.
Look at what John says here.
Tare zvitaura naJohani.
How do we know that it's the last hour?
Tinoziva seiko kuti yava nguva yekuguma.
He says we know it's the last hour because many Antichrists have come.
Tinoziva kuti yava nguva yekupedzisira nekuti vana Antikristu vazhinji vakauya.
What does the word Antichrist mean?
Koinzwire kuti Antikristu norevei.
It means simply this: those that set themselves up in opposition to Christ.
Avo vanozvimisikidza vachipesana kana kurwisana naKristu.
That word anti
Inzwiro rekuti anti
means against.
rinova kurwisa.
So we have an antibiotic.
Saka tine maantibiotic.
Antibiotic is something that is against bacteria.
Inonzi antibiotic chinhu chinorwisana neutachiwana.
All right? So when we talk about an antichrist,
Saka netaura nezvaantikristu
we are talking about people that set themselves up in opposition to Christ, in competition to Christ.
tikutaura vanhu vanozvimisikidza vachiita makwikwi naKristu.
And this is what John is talking about.
Ndozvekutaura nezvazvo naJohani.
This is how we can know that it is the last hour.
Ndozvatinoziva nazvo kuti yava awa
He says,
yekupedzisira.
many will come who will set themselves up in competition to Jesus,
Akati vazhinji vachauya vachazvimisikidza vagoita makwikwi naJesu,
who is the Christ.
iye Kristu.
And we're going to look at this more in the seminar in more depth.
Tichazvitarisa zvakare pasemina ino tichidzika nazvo.
We looked at Matthew chapter 24 and verse 3 to 5 earlier. Let's just look at it again.
Tamboerenga Mateo chapter 24 verse 3 to 5 katitarisa zvakare.
And we see Jesus saying something here that is quite shocking.
Tinoona Jesu achitaura chimwe chinhu pano chinotikadzisa.
He's sitting with his disciples on the Mount of Olives.
Anogara navadzidzi pagomo reMori.
This is just before his crucifixion.
Asati atoenda kuroverwa.
And this is what it says.
Ndozvazvinotaura izvi.
As he sat on the Mount of Olives,
Paanogara pagomo reMori,
the disciples came to him privately saying,
vadzidzi vanouya kwaari pakavanda vachiti,
tell us, when will these things be?
titaurei kuti zvichaitika rini
And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?
uye chiratidzo chekuuya kwenyu chichava chei nechekuguma kwenyika.
Jesus answered and said to them,
Jesu akapindura akati kwavari,
take heed that no one deceives you.
chenjerai kuti murege kunyengerwa nomunhu,
For many will come in my name,
nekuti vazhinji vachauya muzita rangu
saying, I am the Christ,
vachiti ndini Kristu,
and deceive many.
uye vachanyengera vazhinji.
Now let's just have a look at these words.
Atimboita semashoko aya.
Firstly, what did the disciples ask here?
Chekutanga vadzidzi vakabvunza kuti kudii pano.
They said, what will the sign of your coming be?
Akati chiratidzo chekuuya kwenyu chichava chei.
They didn't ask, what will the signs, plural, of your coming be?
Havana kubvunza kuti ko zviratidzo zvekuuya kwenyu zvakawanda ndezvei.
It's in the singular.
Vakataura zvimwe chete.
What will the sign of your coming be?
Chiratidzo chekuuya kwenyu chichava chei.
Do you see the difference there?
Kuona mutsauko wacho.
They weren't asking for many signs.
Vakanga vasikakumbire kuudzwa zviratidzo zvizhinji.
They were asking for the one sign.
Vaikumbira chiratidzo chimwe chete.
And it says here, Jesus answered them.
Zvinonzi pano Jesu akavapindura.
And what was the sign that he gave to them?
Ko chiratidzo chaakavapa ndechipi?
He answered their question and he says, take heed, no one deceives you.
akapindura kubva akati chenjerai murege kunyengerwa nemunhu.
For many will come in my name, saying, I am the Christ, and will deceive many.
Nekuti vazhinji vachauya muzita rangu vachiti ndini Kristu uye vachanyengera vazhinji.
You see, today in the church, when we talk about the signs that the Lord is coming is near,
Munoona nhasi kamukereke achitaura pamusoro pezviratidzo kuti kuuya kwashe kwava pedyo.
we so often we talk about, have you heard about how many earthquakes there are these days?
Kazhinji tinogara tichitaura pamusoro pekuti makanzwa here kunyengetika kwenyika kwakawanda kuitika.
The wars,
Hondo,
the rumors of the wars,
guhwa rehondo,
the famines,
nzara,
the pestilences.
zvirwere.
And we say these are the signs that his coming is near.
Toti ndo zviratidzo zvokuti kuuya kwake kwava pedyo.
But we forget that the sign that Jesus gave to the apostles was a sign of deception.
Asi tinokanganwa kuti chiratidzo chikuru chakapiwa naJesu kuvadzidzo vake chiratidzo cheunyengeri.
Do you know, in this chapter, Matthew 24,
Munoziva here kuti muchapter iyi Matthew 24,
this discourse, this teaching that Jesus gives,
dzidziso iyi yakapiwa naJesu
which we're all familiar with,
yose yatinoziva tose.
it's called, in theological terms, it's referred to as the Olivet Discourse.
Patheology inonzi the Olivet Discourse.
Do you know that in that entire discourse, that entire teaching that Jesus gave
Munoziva here kuti kudzidziso yese yakapiwa naJesu iyi
about the coming of the Lord in the end times,
pamusoro pekuuya kwashe panguva dzokupedzisira,
do you know that earthquakes are mentioned once?
munoziva here kuti kudengadenga kwenyika kunotaurwa kamwe chete,
Wars and rumors of wars are mentioned once.
hondo nekuhwa rehondo zvinotaurwa kamwe chete,
Famines, once.
nzara kamwe chete,
Pestilence, once.
zvirwere kamwe chete,
Persecution, once.
kutambudzwa kamwe chete,
The preaching of the gospel of the kingdom, once.
kuparidzwa kwevhangeri yeumambo kamwe chete,
The abomination of desolation, once.
nyangadzi kumira padzigoteni kamwe chete,
The great tribulation,
kutambudzwa kukuru
well, he refers to those particular words twice.
anotaura izvozvo kaviri.
How many times does he talk about deception?
Ko unyengeri anotaura kangani?
3 times.
Katatu.
He talks more about deception than anything else
Anotaura
in this discourse.
zvakati wandei pamusoro peunyengeri pakupfuura zvimwe zvose padzidziso yacho.
The very first answer he gives to the apostles is, watch out, no one deceives you.
Mhinduro yekutanga yanopa kuvapostora ndeyekuti chenjerai murege kunyengerwa nemunhu.
A few verses later, he mentions it again.
Mushure mumavhesi mashomanoma anotaura zvakare.
And near towards the end, he mentions it again.
Pakupedzisira zvakare anozvitaura zvakare.
You know, God often speaks about things 3 times.
Unoona, Mwari anowanzotaura pamusoro pezvinhu katatu.
And I'm sure we've been taught that when God says something 3 times, it means he really wants us to listen to it.
Ndinotenda takadzidziswa tose kuti kana Mwari wakataura chinhu katatu zvinoreva kuti wanoda kuti tichiteerere.
When he says something once, he wants us to listen to it.
Wakataura chimwe chinhu kamwe chete anoda kuti tichiteerere.
But when he says something 3 times,
Asi pamutarisa kutaura chinhu katatu
repeatedly,
wachidzokorora,
it means he really wants us to listen.
zvinoreva kuti wanoda kuti tinyatsochiteerera.
And I believe this sign of deception
Ndinotenda kuti chiratidzo ichi cheunyengeri
is the chief sign
ndicho chiratidzo chikuru pane zvose
that we are living in the days just before the coming of the Lord.
chinoratidza kuti taakurarama mazuva ekuti Ishe wapedza.